Okay, so yesterday we talked about plant growth and development. We talked about the three kinds of tropisms. We talked about geotropism, which is a growth response to gravity. We talked about phototropism, okay, growth response to light. Thigmotropism, growth response to touch. Okay, and we talked about the 5 different plant hormones. We talked about auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins. Okay, we talked about abscisic acid and ethylene. Okay, all of which have different effects on the growth and development of a plant. And what we're going to go over today is stuff that you're probably already familiar with. It's fairly common sense stuff, but we need it for after the Easter break when we're going to do our plant growth lab design activity, where we're going to design a lab to test the effect of some factor variable on the growth of a plant. Okay? So, what are some things that are present in the environment that affect the growth of a plant? We actually brainstormed some of these yesterday. Okay, light.
Water.
Water.
Soil.
Soil.
Turbulent.
Temperature is absolutely one.
Competition.
Competition. Okay. Now, are some of those things that we've listed living and some of them non-living? You want to remember what the technical terms are for a living part of a system and a non-living part?
Abiotic and biotic.
Exactly. Hello. Hey. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Sorry guys, just give me 1 sec here.
Still recording. All right, so some of them are biotic. That means that they're the result of living things. Some of them are abiotic, which means they're just the non-living parts of the plant's environment. Okay, so things like temperature, sunlight, soil, water, okay, things like that. Those are all abiotic components. They're not living parts of the ecosystem that they live in. They're non-living parts. Okay, and then there's the living parts, and so that would be competition. So that could be other plants. Okay, but it could also be predators. It could also be decomposers. Okay, bacteria, right? All that kind of stuff. Parasites. Okay, would be another biotic factor. All those things can affect the growth of a plant. So what we're going to go over today, basically, just some of those factors and what they do. Okay, so we kind of already brainstormed a lot of the things that are in this picture, okay, and a lot of them were the abiotic or non-living parts of the ecosystem. Okay. All right, so important abiotic components, temperature, right? Temperature is directly linked to the rate of photosynthesis, okay? And the higher the temperature gets, generally, the higher the rate of photosynthesis, but there's an upper limit to that. Okay? If it gets too hot, the plant will shut down and it will not carry out photosynthesis, okay, beyond a certain temperature. So the relationship between temperature and photosynthesis, so if we have degrees Celsius here and we have photosynthesis on this axis, the graph kind of looks like this. And it just tanks, okay, after a certain temperature. That certain temperature is about 40 degrees Celsius. Okay? Once it gets hotter than about 40 degrees, plants just shut down. Okay? They stop carrying out photosynthesis because the rate of evaporation gets too high and they just can't keep going. All right? Is that making some sense? Okay, so temperature plays that role. Now, the other part of this is that if you drop below 0, what's happening to the rate of photosynthesis? Can a plant carry out photosynthesis if it's below freezing? No. Absolutely not. Okay? No water can be transported through the plant if it's frozen. Okay? They don't transport ice through the xylem. Right? It's very difficult to get water to evaporate up your stomates when your leaves are gone if you're a deciduous plant. Okay? So all those things really affect that rate of photosynthesis. Okay? Plus, plants can't regulate their body temperature. Their temperature is whatever their environment is. Okay, they're not mammals, not like us that can, control our body temperature at least to an extent. Okay, water, as we said, okay, that's an important one. It's essential to life, but its availability varies drastically, not just from environment to environment, but sometimes even within the same environment. Right? In like May and June around here, there's water galore. Okay, runoff is happening. June is our wettest month by far here in southern Alberta. Okay, but by August, there's nothing. Okay, everything is dried up. We haven't had rain in 3 weeks. Okay, so its availability can vary quite a bit, even within the same environment, even within a small space of time. Okay, so plants have to be able to adapt to that. They've got to get their growing done when it's available and the temperature is right, okay? Because by the time it gets, to be a little bit later in the season, they're not going to have as much water available to make fruit, carry out photosynthesis, all that stuff. Okay? All right. Sunlight, okay, provides energy, obviously, that carries out photosynthesis or drives photosynthesis, so that's important. That's the basis of all food chains and food webs. But the amount of light is also an important factor in telling plants when to do things. Okay? It also influences when their predators might do things. Because the length of day cues basically everything around here. Okay? It tells plants when to go dormant. It tells plants when to come back. It tells animals when is it time to hibernate or not hibernate. When is it time to mate? When is it time to have the babies? Okay? All that kind of stuff is all influenced by the length of day. Okay? Like right now, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but we're seeing the return of basically two very different organisms right now. Okay? I saw the first gopher of spring dead on the road the other day. Okay? This is the time of year when they come out. Right? The snow is just starting to disappear. Okay? The days are about 12 hours and 12 hours. They come out and they start, moseying around and getting things done. Okay? But it's the young of the year that come out because they need the most food. Okay? And they're also the dumb ones. So they're the ones that end up dead on the road. Okay? Because they just kind of run everywhere. Right? And geese are coming back. Okay? You probably heard them honking. Okay, the last few days, because again, the length of day is about even. Okay, they come back when the length of day is about even. They leave when the length of day is about even. Or at least they start training to leave around that time. Okay, you guys ever notice that? Sometimes in the fall, it looks like the geese are flying the wrong way. They're actually training. They actually do a lot of practice flights, okay, in order to make that long single trip down south. Okay, so light's important not just as a source of energy, but also for an important cue. That tells things basically when to happen in the environment. Okay, wind, that's one we didn't talk about. But wind can amplify the effect of temperature. We hear about it all the time in the winter. Okay, they say it's minus 30 degrees outside, but with the wind chill, it feels like this. Okay, wind chill is the result of evaporative cooling. So, exposed flesh has obviously moisture in it. If it's exposed to cold wind, water can still evaporate, even if the temperature is well below zero, because your body isn't below zero. Okay? And as soon as water evaporates, energy is lost from your body. A lot, actually. Okay? As water evaporates, we cool very quickly. That's how sweat works. Okay? We perspire or sweat, and then as the sweat evaporates, it makes us feel cooler. Okay? Well, the same is true in the wintertime when we don't want that to be true. If my hands are exposed, moisture is going to evaporate from my flesh, and that's going to make my flesh feel even colder than it actually is outside. That's what wind chill is, and that affects all organisms equally. Okay? For plants, most of the time it's not a really big deal because most plants are dormant around that time. But if you're a spruce tree, you still have your leaves on. You don't drop your leaves, your needles stay on, and it can be a bit of a problem for them. Which is why, when we were talking about it yesterday, the picture didn't turn out very well, but okay, this is those trees I was telling you about that grow like humped over, okay, kind of like this, and they make that snow fence. Okay, you can see here, that whole side of that tree is bare. But on the other side of it, there's all kinds of foliage on the other side, okay? And it's just grown low along the ground and created a snow fence for itself. Okay, that snow will then protect it from the wind. Okay, you get a big snow drift forming around you, the wind won't penetrate through it. And snow is an excellent insulator. Okay, don't know if you've noticed that, but you can make shelters out of snow and stay quite warm inside. Before I got my job here, I used to teach in Saskatchewan, and one of their units in Saskatchewan in biology is snow ecology. Okay, so I would wait until it was -40, and then I would send my kids outside and I'd say, make a big pile of snow in the middle of the football field, and then hollow it out and crawl inside. You'd be surprised how fast people can build a pile of snow and hollow it out when they're cold, because they want to get inside and be warm. And we could get it actually above 0, like it would actually start dripping on people, because it would get warm enough inside to be above 0, even though it was -40 outside. Okay, so snow's a good insulator, which is why lots of organisms will create a situation where snow can pile up around them and protect them. Okay. All right, and so yeah, wind amplifies evaporation. Okay, we know that when a Chinook comes up, that's when everything not only melts, but also when it dries up. Okay, the snow starts melting, but the water dries up quickly too. Okay. All right. Rocks and soil. Okay, so the availability of nutrients and things like that in the soil, because not all soil is created equal. Some soil is really, really rich in nutrients. Some soil is really, really poor in nutrients. Some soil is very basic. Some is very acidic. They have all kinds of properties. Hey, some of it's thick and some of it isn't. Okay, so for example, looking at this dirt right here, what do you suppose the biggest problem organisms growing in that dirt would have?
The amount of rocks.
Yeah, the amount of rocks. That soil is about that thick. Okay? That trowel, I put that in the ground, but it wouldn't stand up on its own. You can't see it, but there's a rock holding it up behind it. Okay? Because I couldn't jam it into the dirt far enough for it to stand up on its own. The dirt was so thin. Right? So this soil is very, very thin. That's why all you see is little scrubby plants and some grass. You don't see any big trees growing there. There isn't enough soil to hold enough water to support a big tree. Okay? So this is actually like above the tree line in the mountains, okay? Where soil is much thinner. Part of the reason why no trees grow above the tree line. The soil is just not complex, thick enough to support it. Okay, and of course some soils have different structures. Okay, this soil is mostly made from limestone, so it's quite fine. Okay, whereas soil around here is quite coarse, because around here all of our soil comes from what kind of rock? What's the bedrock around here made of? Nobody's dug a hole around here? Because you don't have to dig very far in Okotoks before you hit this stuff. Well, there's clay underneath, you're right. There's the topsoil and then there's always a layer of clay, but what's the rock underneath the clay? And it makes the dirt feel really coarse and gritty.
Shale.
Close. Starts with S. Sandstone. Okay, lots and lots of sandstone, which is why our soil around here is so sandy, it's so gritty. Okay, if you go a little bit further north, like to, between Red Deer and Edmonton, the soil is completely different. Okay? It's much darker because there's much more shale and there's much more limestone, so you get much finer soil there. Okay? Okay. Periodic disturbances are also a factor affecting plant growth. What happened here? Fire. Okay, we talked about this the other day, but some pine trees have those special cones that won't release the seeds until they've been burned. Okay, that's a periodic disturbance. It's going to take out and redistribute a lot of the resources that are available. Okay, before the fire, there was a mature forest here. Okay, all those trees were healthy and big, and they would keep the sun from reaching the ground. Okay, they would use up a lot of the moisture in the soil, but now that they're dead, the soil is now, the moisture and nutrients in the soil are readily available for something else. Okay, more sunlight is going to reach the ground. So do different types of organisms grow right after the fire? What's the first thing to grow after a fire? Fire is part of its name. You have never heard of fireweed? Okay? Sometimes it's called paintbrush. It's got these little flowers that look like a paintbrush that's on fire. Okay? It's got little flowers on it. It's one of the first things to grow after a fire. Okay? And so that's simply because light can penetrate all the way to the ground. Okay? It's just a weed that grows about this tall. You redistribute the resources with some sort of periodic disturbance, and new things can grow. Same with a flood. Okay? After a flood, like if you go to the, if you go down onto the Sheep River Valley right now, there's growth almost all the way to the edge of the river. Okay? But after a flood, most of that stuff gets scoured away, okay? And a bunch of silt gets deposited down in its place. Okay? And that silt is very rich in nutrients, and lots of stuff can grow in it. Okay? You guys might not remember it, but back when we had the flood in 2013, that's the stuff they were scooping out of everybody's houses. Okay? Was that thick, mucky silt. Okay? And it's full of all kinds of stuff. That's great for plants to grow in, but really bad to be in your house. Because it can contribute to mold and stuff like that, right? It's just full of nutrients. It changes. A periodic disturbance, no matter what it is, changes the availability of the nutrients in the area, which can then change what kind of plants can grow there. Okay? Same thing happens like after a hurricane. If you get a big storm surge, the ocean comes in, strips stuff off, clears it away, brings in nutrients, new stuff is going to grow. After a tornado, lots of trees get knocked down, little shrubs will grow in their place. Okay? Something like that. All right, it's the interactions between the organisms, the living things and the non-living things that make the environment what it is. Okay? Without the living organisms, you'd never get the nutrients to cycle through, right? So you got, fungi, you got bacteria, you got all kinds of insects, okay? Worms, all the things that live in the soil that help to redistribute and cycle all those nutrients. Okay? So what role do carpenter ants play? Has anyone ever come across these? They're about that big. And they live inside of rotten trees. What are they doing inside the tree? They eat the tree. Okay? They're part of the decomposition process. Okay? When a tree gets kind of older and sick, these ants will burrow into it and they'll make their nest inside. Okay? And part of the thing they do is they chew up the tree, kind of like termites do. Okay? We don't have termites here because it's too cold. Okay? But these are kind of like termites for us. And they can get inside that tree and they'll turn it to sawdust, okay, after a while. What you really want to be careful of is if you're using a chainsaw. Okay? If you hit one of these nests when you're cutting down a tree with a chainsaw, it's really unpleasant. Okay? Because you're going through the tree, the chain goes like this, right? And it spits all the sawdust back onto you. When you hit the nest, it stops spitting sawdust and it starts spitting very angry ants that bite really, really hard. And they don't stop, and you just get all over you. I was cutting and I had shorts on. They got onto my legs, just covered in these things. They're biting me. Very nasty. Yeah. So you gotta be careful. Check the tree. Knock first. If it sounds hollow, don't cut it down. All right. Water, that stuff we've already talked about, so we don't need to go over that. So two different groups that plants can fall into has to do with kind of how they deal with water. Okay? If something is a hydrophyte, it loves very wet conditions. Okay? Phyte is like phile, it means loving. Hydrophyte means like water loving. Okay? So they can tolerate flooded conditions, low oxygen conditions, things like that. Okay? So things like lilies and stuff that grows on the edge of ponds and things like that are hydrophytes. Okay? Tropical rainforest plants are generally hydrophytes as well. Okay? Xerophytes are the opposite. Xerophytes are plants that can tolerate extremely arid or dry conditions. So cacti are a xerophyte. Succulents are a xerophyte. They generally have very altered leaf structure in order to deal with the extreme dryness of their environment. Okay, and that's all we have to cover. We're done for today. Now, just so you know, we're getting pretty close to the end of this unit. We don't have a lot of stuff left to do in this unit. So, as we already said, your unit exam is gonna be April 20th. That's the Thursday of the week we get back. Okay? I will put a unit exam review package on Google Classroom probably tomorrow. Okay, if you wanna look at it over Easter, you can, you don't have to, but you can if you want to. Okay, and we'll probably actually do the unit exam review either tomorrow or Thursday. Because all we have left are the activities, and we don't wanna do those when there might be numbers of people missing.